Okay, well, my name is Sergio Velasquez. As you can hear, I have a Spanish name, but I was born in The Hague, the Netherlands. That's where I grew up. Born in 1961, so I'm 59 years old. When I was about 20 years old, I got into contact with people who practiced Kendo. And that's when I started. So when I was 20, which means next year I'll be 40 years in Kendo. When I was about 30, I was 31, so like more than 10 years after that, I moved to Aruba, and where I picked up a post as a teacher. I'm a teacher. I'm a Spanish teacher, and my father's from here. My father was born and raised here. My father's Colombian, Aruba, so my roots go back to these places, and I'm still happy here. Of course, when I came here, there was no Kendo, and so I had to start from scratch, which was a challenge, but at the same time, it was also a nice incentive to do something because it gave me all the freedom I had to put in place my plans.
Well, yeah, even if we're thinking 40 years ago, I can't imagine there being much Kendo anywhere in the world. Even probably when you started, it was still just burgeoning at that time. So maybe you could talk about like just before you started Kendo, like you're at 20 years old, people have lots of interests. Were you a sports person? Were you an art person? What drew you to this martial art?
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, like when I was like 12 years old or 11, I practiced judo for 2 years, which was like every Wednesday afternoon, and then mom took you to have French fries. That was the kind of judo thing. Was not really deep. It was my first getting to know a little bit of what we call Budo. When I was 20, I was actually I just came out of the army, and you had I don't know if that's still in Canada is the case, but we had a mandatory military service at the time. It was abolished, suspended like 25 years ago in the Netherlands. But at that time, I had to go for my numbers, as they say. So I spent that. Well, that was not a big success. When I was a child, I always wanted to be a soldier, because it looked like kind of cool. But when I was 18, I enlisted after high school. I chose to enlist right away just to get it done with. And at the first day, it turned out that I was not that tough that I thought, as I thought I was. So there was like. Was a wake-up call to me, and then I think the next weeks after that, the only thing I wanted was out. My interest really at the time was being a young rock star. I played in bands, rock and roll bands, and that was my passion at the time. So when I went into the army, there was kind of interruption of my career plans. So I had to find a way to get out. So I, not proudly, but I kind of deserted after a couple of weeks. I just sneaked out, and anyway, I was caught, and I had to go back. I had to serve the remainder of the time. If I don't want to get in prison, I had to stay and do other things. But anyway, I stayed. But my military career basically floundered at that point. It was not what I had expected for the 18 years before that. I always saw myself as. So anyway, when I left the army, when I got out, I was a little bit on the loose. I didn't know what to do, maybe not always the best friends around, doing all kinds of stupid things. I was 19 at the time, almost 20. I went abroad. I went to Spain. I worked there at Costa Brava, something like that, for propping at discotheques and stuff, just finding my way out. And just when I got back, that wasn't what I really liked either. So when I got back, I got myself some temp jobs. And then one of my temp jobs was a driver at the how do you call that? Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I was a driver. I had to go between several buildings, offices that they used. And I had to drive. I was driving driving Miss Daisy. I was driving some people who turned out to be into Kendo, who turned out to be leading figures in Kendo in the Netherlands. So I saw a briefcase with a sticker on it, and it looked like a strange kind of guy. And I asked what that was, and it turned out to be a Kendoka. So from one thing came the other, and they invited me, maybe just come over and just have a look at it. And I went there, and I thought, I don't know why I even get into that, why I even accepted that. But I went there for some reason, and I thought I was going to sit and just watch people doing strange stuff. But then they invited me to roll up my sleeves and just, here's a stick, or here's a sword, or here's a knife. I just try to do that. And it turned out it was so difficult to do something very simple as a basic suburi that I think that's when I really was confronted with myself. And I think what I did not succeed in overcoming was my simple things and overcoming yourself while I was in the army. And I thought, well, maybe this is a way to make up for that. And I kept coming back for that reason, simply because I couldn't do very simple things that I had to do, just step up and down and swing a sword. And for some reason, I got fascinated by that. And well, long story short, I stayed there, and that's what I came to pursue.
Well, so we know that these martial arts have some military backing to it, like there's a history behind it. And your time in the army, I know you were kind of dragged back into it. Did you actually develop that kind of need for, or that understanding of discipline and building up, like repeating these same movements and trying to overcome yourself? It sounded like it was something that you wanted to do in the army, but it didn't quite you didn't quite capture it until you started Kendo. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I have to kind of discipline myself, or I mean, I have to be, if I think back about how I was at that time, that's 40 years ago. So maybe I'm projecting a little bit my own thoughts and, my experiences that I have now in the life that I am having now. At the time, I think it wasn't that deep. But one thing I learned in the army was that I don't like to be ordered around by some stupid sergeant. You know what I mean? And I think in Kendo, I learned that if you don't want somebody else to kick your butt, you better do it yourself. And maybe I came to the realization when I was doing Kendo that, hey, there's nobody who's pushing me to do this. If I don't go myself, there's lots of things. I think the most difficult thing of going to training is going there. Once you have the training, doesn't matter how hard the training is going to be. The toughest thing is always just get up every time. I train 3 times a week. That's my routine for the last so many years. But the difficult thing is going. And in the army, you're bossed around. You're told what to do, so you do it. And it's the same thing with my students. If I tell them to do that, then they have to do that. But it's much more difficult if nobody's pushing you, you have to push yourself. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. And I think that's the thing what has been fascinating me. Maybe at the time, not so consciously, but in retrospect, I think that is what kept me going.
I found an article, I think, that was talking about the early 90s, some kind of big seminar with like the first ever tournament or something with Iijima Sensei. And it seemed like already at that time they say these up and coming youngsters that were really going to be the next generation. What do you attribute to that? I don't want to just say it's success, but in some ways it was like you did find something that you were good at. What do you attribute to that kind of early, recognition in some ways?
Yeah, well, I started in 1981. And the first 2 years was, I was not that disciplined. So the first year and a half, until I got my bogu, I trained a full year without a bogu. I was just, just practicing basic stuff for 1 year. When I got my Bogo, I got a little bit more serious. So I think after 2 years, I really got my routine established. This is no matter what, I'm not gonna quit. So after a couple of years, then there will be a moment when your hard work pays off, one way or another. The standards were not that high at the time compared to now. But still, there was a lot of competition. There were very interesting people to train with. And after a couple of years, I started to win some Shiai. I was only 24, 25, so, maybe he's a good candidate as a junior member of the national team for the Netherlands at the time. And that's how I think in 86, I was asked to join the Dutch squad for the European Championships in London at the time. That was my 86. I'd been practicing about 5 years almost when I got selected first time, and from that moment ever since, I participated in the Dutch team until up to 91 when I was in Toronto. Toronto was I was the captain of the Dutch team at the World Championships. And the year after that, I went to Aruba. But we were all gung ho. You get the neck of it. You have the physical ability to do that. When you're like late 20s, early 30s. I was 30 when I was in Toronto. So that's when you're really at the height of your physical prowess, as they say. And it was fun. But that was my life. I was a student. I studied. I picked up in 83. I went to university from 83, 86. I studied Latin American studies. I got my master's when I was around that time, 89, I think. But I was always, during my study, I was not a very serious student, so serious enough to get my degree in the end. But being a student gave me opportunities to practice more. So I practiced a lot. I practiced also Taekwondo. I practiced Kendo and Taekwondo for 10 years. I practiced them together. So one day I was practicing Kendo, the next day I was practicing Taekwondo, or sometimes on Sundays I practiced both. So I practiced like six days a week. And under the guise of being a college or university student. But it was a big chunk of my life, of my 20s. And then when I was around 31, I had graduated and I couldn't find a job that suited me. I was a little bit fed up with the landscape, the Kendo landscape in the Netherlands, and I think most of all with myself. So then I got offered a job in Aruba. And that's when a new chapter started.
If you were to think about just describing yourself, your personality, your character, it seems like you have these Latin American roots. Your dad was from there. You probably grew up speaking Spanish at home. You also have this Nordic root that's where you grew up. And then there's this Asian, Japanese, Korean based on your martial arts. How do all those things kind of merge together into developing who you are? How would you see you as a mixture of those three very different cultures?
I think basically you sum it up. First of all, my parents divorced when I was very young. So I grew up in a totally white Dutch family, my mother's family. It wasn't until the same time, around my 20s, 21, when I first went to Aruba to meet my father's family, and they were Colombian. So I stayed in Aruba. The first time I went to Aruba, I was 21. So I just had started Kendo the year before. I didn't speak any Spanish. I learned that in a very short time. I taught myself. And then I came to Aruba for 5 weeks, stayed with my grandparents, and they only spoke Spanish. So, and I always liked languages. So, I had studied Latin and Greek when I was in gymnasium. It's a kind of college with a kind of a high school. European high schools, you have like where they teach classic language. like in the Latin and Greek. So I had been immersed in with grammar and stuff, and we learned French and German, and of course Dutch, which is my native tongue, and French and German and English. So then I think Spanish was quite easy to learn, and I pursued that. When I went to Aruba, I started to, I noticed that my search for roots became more and more prominent, and so I pursued it also academically. Then I get into Kendo, and as you say, then that's another part. Yeah, that's like you call like a triangle. You know, you have the European part, and I have the Latin American part, and then I got into Kendo, and then I got then the Oriental, the Asian part came. Later, I married. My wife is Korean. She's also Kendoka. So yeah, my daughter is. I think if I'm the mix, my daughter is really. She's 16 and she's really the mix. She speaks all languages. You know, she's only 16 and she practices Kendo, maybe reluctantly now, but she speaks Korean, Dutch, and Spanish and English, just like. So yeah, I think Kendo has given me that. And in addition to what I do professionally and coming to Aruba has also given me a lot. And of course, my basic identity should be Dutch, I suppose. But I try to combine everything. You know, I try to see it in a universal way. You know, sometimes it's convenient to be Dutch, and other moments it's convenient to be Latino. And then the next day you're okay. You're a Kendoka, you're a Budoka. You know, I think it becomes part of your personality. I think that's the whole idea.
I know, so I totally get what you mean, and I know it could be difficult to just come up with an example right now, but like what might be something where it's a situation where it's better to be one than another? If I like just think about myself, like growing up in Canada, I have like Asian background, but understanding my wife's Japanese, but understanding Japanese culture was really, really hard for me because there's just certain ways that like if you're from there, probably Korean is similar. There's this unspoken etiquette behind how you interact and whether you put someone else in a situation where they have to say yes or no when they don't want to say yes or no. I found that super hard. What are kind of these things that you've noticed based on like your experience in Latin America and in the Netherlands and then through your wife?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, I'm still learning every day. There's when you think you understand it fully, then you learn something. Then the next lesson is there to be learned. What I learned is, well, first of all, you know, there's like the difference between the Dutch mentality and the Aruba mentality, which is huge. The Aruba mentality and the Colombian and Latino mentality is also a little bit different, although it's very, there's a lot of affinity, and that's very close geographically and culturally. And then there's the Korean or Japanese or Asian culture, which is really, it's really the opposite. What you see, for instance, the culture of shame, we call it shame culture. There in Caribbean culture as compared to Western European culture, I think people they feel like ashamed or something like that, and you also see that maybe they don't want to be confronted, they don't want to be put to shame. Let's put it that way. That's very strong in Asian culture as well as in Caribbean or Latin culture. Yeah, and Latin America is so big, it's very, people from Argentina and people from Cuba or from Mexico, they have a lot in common, but they also have huge differences. The Caribbean culture is also very different from we call the interior, the interior part of, for instance, Colombia. But the shaming culture is that's something very strange to Western European thought, So what I like about one thing in Kendo is what I learned through Kendo and through the culture and through my acquaintances in Asian, is that you don't boast, you don't bluff. The humility, that kind of stuff, is something that, you just show who you are by your actions and not by your words, and just by, so those kind of things. Just be humble, but in a good way. So all that, every day you're being confronted with that. Okay, and where do I stand? Am I too big-mouthed, or should I speak up? All these kind of things. But I think that's how life becomes interesting, although not always easy. And it's interesting to see with my daughter that she has obviously things. She was born and she's growing up in Aruba, so she is very Aruban in one way. On the other hand, because of me, she's also very Dutch with some Latino elements in it. And from her mother, she's very Korean. Yeah. So she's very dedicated to what she does. Like my wife, she's working in the garden right now. I mean, she works. I have a Western mentality, a Western European mentality. I think, hey, I think whether I'm done or not, but I think let's call it a day. We've done enough. Whereas in her mentality, I don't know if I can generalize that, but the day is done when the work is done. And not because it's 6 o'clock or something like that. And so it's interesting to see. And sometimes I position myself in one culture and sometimes in the next. Maybe I'm a little bit pragmatic about them.
That last thing really resonated with me too. It's like, it's time for bed. Maybe let's just get ready. No, this has to be done first. These plates have to be put away in the drawer. Well, they're drying on the rack. That's okay. No, it has to be perfectly clean before we can even do the next thing. I'm like, okay. So when you finally decided to move to Aruba, I'm sure that there were certain plans that you had. Yeah, you're going to work there. You're going to live there. You're going to have to find a way to continue your kendo there. What are some of the things that you had planned, like it was in your mind, that actually ended up going as planned, and what were things that didn't go as planned?
When I went to Aruba, first it was on a contract for 3 years, and of course then I would have the option to go back to Holland and they would pay my costs and everything. But once I left the Netherlands, I thought, I felt it was for good. I didn't go to Aruba for, like many people come to Aruba from the Netherlands. They have a contract or something like that, and then after that they go back. We have a good time in the sun. It's nice for the children to grow up, and they grow up on the beach and everything. But after a couple of years, when they go to high school, maybe it's better to go back to the old country. I never had that. I thought when I came to Aruba, no, this is where I'm going to stay. I felt it instinctively, and after 30 years, I think I haven't changed my mind a bit about that. You don't know what the future holds in store, but still, I think this is where I rooted. Kendo-wise, I had been practicing, and I also had been teaching Kendo, and there were some things that I thought, I was like the assistant teacher. And I learned a lot, but I was still young. I was still a young teacher, and the people that I was practicing with were mostly older than myself. And so, you have to respect their seniority in other ways. I mean, experience in life. But I got some ideas, and I thought, if I ever had the chance to start my own dojo, then I will do certain things differently, and I put more emphasis on this or that. And one thing that I really liked was when I read Gori no Sho, the Book of Five Rings by Musashi, was the idea of the Bumbu Ryodo, Bumbu Ichi. And that's why I call this dojo, until this day, we call it Bumbu Ichi Dojo Aruba. And Bumbu Ichi is, Bumbu Ryodo is like the pen and the sword in the cord. And I think that also fits on my personality because I'm a linguist. So that's the Bun part. And the Bu is, of course, the Budo part. And I always felt that those two reinforce each other. And I think I thought that's what I really explicitly want to pursue. And when I started this dojo, I really made that, I could make that, I could realize that. So that was the plan I had, and that's the plan I still have, that's what I live by, basically. And yeah, sometimes you make a planning, about growing. Of course, we all want to grow our dojos. You want to spread the art. You want to share your philosophy and your ideas about it. And sometimes it goes with ups and downs. And of course, I thought, by now, after so many years, I think we're going to have several dojos. And I thought we would be much bigger in numbers, and that did not work out. We had bigger numbers, and then it went down. And now we have the pandemic, so not much to be expected number-wise for 2020 or 2021. Who knows? But basically, that's what I wanted to work out. And so far, I'm happy. There's things to be pursued. But basically, that's what I plan to do. I want to spread. At least Kendo is rooted firmly in Aruba. I had also hoped to spread it through other Dutch or former Dutch territories in the Caribbean, and that has not transpired yet. That's going to be difficult also. On the other hand, what we did achieve, and I had never thought that we'd do that, is that we have a very vibrant and close-knit international Latin American society. We have TLACI, which is the Latin American Kendo Confederation. And that went through certain stages, but I can say we have a very nice, well-organized and very united organization that goes from Mexico, say from the Rio Grande, as the Americans say, up till the southern cone of Latin America. So, and I've also I've worked for that too. I'm really happy and proud that we have achieved that by now. So, in retrospect, it's been a well spent 28, 29 years now.
One of the things you mentioned was when you were still practicing in the Netherlands, you were noticing certain things that you would do it your way. And it reminds me of something that my sensei said maybe 10 years ago, was that she's grateful for all of her senseis, whether they're good or bad. And in fact, she's learned more from the bad senseis than she has from the good ones, because what not to do is usually a better framework for how you run your dojo. What are some of the things that you've learned through your experience that you knew that, okay, I needed to apply it this way when you finally started your own?
Yeah. One thing that, I think we all have the experience. If you stay longer, you'll notice that, hey, you look around you, hey, all the people that I started with, where are they? And they leave at some point. Why am I still here? Am I so special? Or am I so stupid, or whatever? What is it that I'm still here? And of course, I had many students, and they came and went, and so you see patterns about what is that makes people come, and what makes people stay, and what makes people go away, and how should I think this is something that is we all, everybody who has responsibility for a dojo has to think, how do we retain membership, and how we grow our membership, and what makes them ticking, and what works, and maybe a little train too tough, or is it not tough enough, or is it not? Anyway, all those kind of questions. So that's something that you cannot. It's very hard to let go of, especially if you are the main responsible person in the dojo. I don't know if you have a position like that in your dojo, but the word commitment is very important. And one thing I noticed in the Netherlands is that why do people always have these excuses for not training? And that's something that still boggles me sometimes as today, you know. I never skip training. I can tell you in all honesty that except for the first maybe 2 years, a year and a half or two when I started as a youngster, I think from 1983, 1984, I don't think, unless I was really sick, but I never, honestly, I did not, there's no 2 weeks that I did not practice Kendo or Taekwondo or what I was practicing. And then I think and this is what I try to share and to, instill in my students is that, you know, don't give me that bull. Your reason, I mean, you're busy, you're tired. Yeah, I get it. So am I. You know, so I try to give you an example of, okay, you don't have to feel great. Kendo, people say, yeah, it should be fun. No, it's shugyo. Yeah, we call it shugyo. It's like austere training, you know? It's like, if it's fun all the time, if that is the criterion to practice, I'm stopped practicing. Why? Yeah, it wasn't fun anymore. Then I think, what were you doing in the first place? I mean, do you practice EI or Kendo or something? Of course, it's fun. But first, you have to bite the bullet, and then it becomes really fun. I said, no, Kendo should not be fun. Kendo should be great. It's Budo, you know? I like playing football, or I like, you know, you can play any kinds of game and anything you like. But that's you do that for fun, unless you want to be a millionaire. But you do that for fun. And I like Kendo, you know. I feel good afterwards. I may feel like hell before I want to go, you know. It was a really tough day, but just because I feel so miserable, that's why I go to training. Sometimes when people, and I still have a hard time being, okay, I have to be pedagogically responsible. But if people tell me, oh, I'm sorry, Sensei, I had a really shitty day today, I cannot come because I don't feel well, then right, these days I don't try to persuade people anymore, but they know exactly how I feel. I said, if you feel really bad, that's when you have to practice. If you feel really tired, that's when you have to practice, and then it becomes fun, but in a different way. So all these kind of things, I think, in their, I think those things I already had in mind when I came to Aruba. You know, I want people who are committed. People who are not committed, I mean, just get out of here, or, you know, don't waste your time or my time or Sensei's time and other people. And yeah, you want to be, you can sugarcoat it, but the message remains the same.
I remember another sensei that was saying like how they felt like initially they were too harsh. They were like, I only want, like these committed people. And then they realized that, oh, wait, no, I'm like scaring people away. So then they became more lenient and said, okay, let's all have fun. And then their dojo ended up being people that were not serious. People were just doing Kendo for fun. And it was no fun for that sensei anymore because he dug his own grave by making that happen. So totally. How do you see Aruban culture? I know island cultures are very unique in that way. How do you see the people in that island taking on to Kendo? What are things that seem to resonate with the locals, and what are things that you found that you have to teach them because they're just not exposed to that kind of way of behaving?
Good question. Well, of course, you can go back to stereotyping, you know, like, people from Northern Europe, Northerners, or from Western Europe, you know, they're more disciplined, and people on the island, they're more, you know, just live the fun, live the life, you know, and just chill and stuff like that. Superficially, that's true, but in the end, when it comes to people who practice Budo, I don't see real differences. The only thing that I noticed was different was that the excuses were different. The excuses, maybe people in maybe in Canada is not that different from the Netherlands. I think you cannot come with a your excuse, at least on the surface, it has to sound credible. Yeah, it has to be maybe a little. People have maybe more elaborate excuses, but still, if you go to the court, it's still trivial most of the time. I think in Aruba, people in that sense were maybe more innocent and maybe more transparent. And then, come on, you're not seriously. Come on, can't you come up with a better excuse? I'm sorry, but my anyway, it's they come up with real lame excuses. I thought it's almost childish, but that's what was my impression at the time. In the end, but the people who are serious, who really want to come, these people you have everywhere. But the people who are serious, the people who are really want to be committed. The people are serious, they want to commit, and I don't see any difference anywhere. So what is interesting, you talk about island culture. Well, one island isn't the next, but the Caribbean island culture is that we are small countries. We have a culture where when somebody finishes high school and wants to pursue the next stage in his studies, then they go abroad. They go to Holland or they go to the US or Canada. A lot of times, many students go to Canada now. But they are leaving. And so the demographics of our dojo, especially now, it's always been like, it's very difficult to have guys or girls or people in their 20s. I started when I was 20, and the people that I practiced with and the whole team was guys in their 20s. In Aruba, when I started the first maybe almost 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years or so, I deliberately did not recruit kids. I thought, I don't want to deal with parents, who come like, well, you shouted you shouted too hard. You were too harsh for Johnny, and I didn't want to deal with parents. Yeah, I'm a teacher, so I had to do it in school already. No, not in my free time. So I thought, I want to build up first a cadre of people who become senpai, so adult people. And then they can start teaching to kids and whatever, and we can grow organically. So after 10 years, I don't know what happened. I went to on vacation. I went to Europe, and I went to Hungary. It was maybe in 2001. I went to Hungary, and then I saw what they had accomplished with their kids, with their youth. In only 10 years' time, I thought, wow, these guys. And if I compare it with what I'd seen in the Netherlands, where there was no attention, still very scantily. In Holland, still, I think, well, I have to be careful watching this, but if I compare it with some countries, European countries, not even, you can compare it to the United States or Brazil, where they have this culture of kids kendo. But in Europe, some countries really invested in their kids, and it was noticeable. And Hungary I was there and I was flabbergasted. I thought, wow. So when I went back, I started to change my mind, and I started to change my policies, and I started to aim for kids kendo. And then in the first decade of the century, so from 2001, 2002, up till now, actually, we got steadily kids coming in, but hardly any guys in their 20s or 30s. And it's been like that, and that has to do probably with the fact that when you're 18, 19, you fly out, you go to Holland, and maybe when they come back, then they are, then life has caught up with them for some reason. They cannot train, and they won't train, or they're too lazy or too busy or whatever it is. So I'm still struggling with that. I want to grow, but we don't have that age category. What we do have, and that's maybe this cultural thing or not. The ones who are very steady in our Kendo community in Aruba are the women. And maybe that has to do with the macho culture. And the machos are like, very hard on the outside, but very fragile on the inside. And I think for Budo, especially for Kendo, I think you can be very soft on the outside, but you have to have a very strong core and a very strong conviction. And I think in this culture, the women are very strong on the inside, and they have to be, nice and sweet and beautiful on the outside. And maybe that's good for Kendo, as long as the core is strong. And men here I don't think generally they're not so strong. Maybe because of the machismo. Well, that's my little theory, I hope I'll be proven wrong one day.
So we talked a little bit about the things that you've tried to implement as a dojo leader, as just an organizational leader, because you are the highest rank coming in. But that also creates challenges of your own practice. How have you been able to maintain yourself? Who have you been able to find in that region to help you out? Or have you had to connect with people from longer distances? And how does that work out for you?
Yeah, that's always been a challenge. I must say, when my wife, we've been married for almost 17 years now, so we met through Kendo. She was in IBU, International Budo University in Japan, in 2002 to 2001 to 2003. I think she was there for 2 years, and she was a friend of Ricky Ibihara Sensei from New York. And she recommended her to go to Aruba, just, go there. There's a nice guy, and they practice Kendo, so you want to go. So when my wife came, she was already an accomplished Yondan, fourth dan at the time. And she came and she stayed, to give you the short version of it. She's phenomenal. She's very fanatical, and she practices. So I have somebody who really, who I can really practice with. Of course, she's not a higher grade than I am. So it's not the sensei in that sense. But so it's been a challenge to have somebody who's really really superior in experience. What I learned, what I practiced in the Netherlands, I practiced also with Luis Vitalis, who was he was an international referee and everything, and he was in the same position in a way that I was in the Netherlands. He was like already a Nanadan I think in the 80s, and whereas the highest rank in the Netherlands was maybe Sandan or Yondan. And so he also had to ask me, how do you keep your level? How do you learn? And he said, you just have to you have to limit yourself, or you have to limit yourself. He said, you have to constrain yourself. You have to, maybe those are not his words, but I'm rewording it, but you have to really frame yourself, and within the limitations that you have, you must find, you must train without excuses. If this is your level and this is the person you train with, you must go all out against that person. When it comes to, you have to make that perfect man. You have to make a perfect technique, this kind of thing. So you have to be very strict on yourself. And then I come back to what I was referring to earlier about my experience in the military and my early Kendo experiences, that you really better kick your own butt. And I think that came in handy. So I practice up till now. I practice everything. I do a lot of saburi, little basics. I run. I swim a lot. I swim. So physically, I'm still very demanding on myself. I do everything, the training, you know. Even it's not this. I'm not the teacher who says okay. I do the suburi, and then you guys practice, and I tell you what to do until you really kill each other, and then at the end of the training, the last minutes, I put on my man, and then I finish you off. That's really something I really don't like, and I never wanted to be a teacher like that. I really want to be, you know, I'm the sergeant who goes along with his men in the ditches, and that's my mentality, and maybe that kept me sharp. On the other hand, when it comes to higher levels of kendo, like especially from 6th dan and 7th dan on, the details become very important, and it was a big struggle to get from my 6th dan, from my rokudan to my nanadan. I don't know how many times I had to do the exam. I practiced very hard, but I didn't have enough opponents of a high level to practice with, and so that's why it took me a long time to figure out a lot of these finer points. And but yeah, I always go back. I always go back to the basics. I go back. I tell my students also, you know, it's normally the way you cut, the way you do suburi, is the way you execute your kihon. Everything changes, even though it's very standard. But your body grows older, your mind grows more experienced. So your kamai, the whole stance, everything changes over time. It's a very gradual, but you have to reinvent yourself. You have to reinvent your basics all the time. And once you realize that that's normal and that's okay, then that gives you a little bit more rest, more peace of mind, and accepting that, oh, you know, every cut is different from the previous one. And with that in mind, I got more calm, more peace of mind, and I accept that, and that's the way I try to practice and keep myself sharp, even though there's nobody to cut me down a size that easily. So if I go once or twice a year, you know, I go abroad or we get somebody here, yeah, then I really try to make the most of it. But it's very seldom, unfortunately, but fortunately too, because it gives you a very strong notion. It gives me a strong notion that, hey, you know, I'm out here on my own. I have to really, I'm responsible. Nobody else is responsible for my kendo but me. So that's why the way I try to deal with it. There's no alternative.
You sound like someone that is not someone who accepts mediocrity. You're someone that, like, if you're doing something, you have to do it well, and it really shows in how you're speaking about your practice and how you're speaking about what you're trying to create in Aruba. But then you're in a position that is super challenging, and for someone that has that same kind of personality, for you, because you chose to move to Aruba, because you have, I guess, now a little bit of age behind that, giving you like some wisdom, some understanding of yourself that has allowed you to go through this tough time of being like in a new place with people that might not always be serious. And then now COVID's coming in. But right now, there's going to be a lot of people that are younger, that have less experience. What advice could you give them to be able to just accept, or not really, I don't want to say accept, but push through these types of challenges where, like, you can't, if you always wanted to be the best in yourself, but no, now you're a leader, you have to focus on other people. You always wanted to create something that's really strong, but you can't control other people. You can't control how they behave, how they think. For people that are younger in this situation, what kind of advice do you think you can give them?
Well, like I said, there's no silver lining to this whole tragedy. You can sugarcoat it, but it's shugyo. One thing I started to, there's like a requirement. When people want to practice Kendo, when they come newly, they show interest. I tell them, well, not that way, you can call it bluntly, but I try to be as diplomatic as I can, but I have a paper for people. If you're interested in Kendo, I got it in 4 languages. I even had it translated into Chinese. But the practice of Kendo, the practice of Budo, and this is for parents to read, but also for people who aspire to become. And then I say, you have to, we practice 3 times a week. We have 3 practices a week. I said, you have to commit at least to 2 times a week. Yeah, no matter what. Yeah. So I don't oblige anybody to come 3 times a week. But if you want to start, I said, you need to train at least twice a week. Otherwise, I know for a fact, statistically, over my almost 40 years, I can tell by 99% you're going to drop out within a few years. And that's your waste of time, and it's a waste of my time, and it's a waste of other people's time as well if you drop out. So I don't want to drop out. So what I say to everybody, whether they're going to be in a leading position or not, is that you have to people have to have an understanding that if you don't practice regularly with a certain frequency, and especially in your formative years in Budo, which I consider at least up to Shodan, you have to make a niche in your life. You have to give it a place in your life, no matter what. I can be up till here with work or everything, but the training has to be sacred. So if I would give an advice to anybody, be it as a teacher, be it as a leader in Kendo. As a leader in Kendo, I think you have to be honest with the people that you lead. You have to be honest with them and, hey, tell them that they have to sacrifice, it shouldn't be a sacrifice, but that they have to be prepared. You have to declare your training at least twice a week as sacred. Otherwise, you're going to feel frustrated. You're always going to feel guilty because you feel guilty towards your Kendo training. You feel Kendo towards your family because you leave them behind. Oh, you're going to go training again? You're going to out again? And the wife is going to be unhappy. So be honest. Be honest about expectations. You cannot expect this if your input is this. And try to sugarcoat it. Maybe you have a friendly face and you can say that, and people take it, or I can tell people straight to their face. I think that is maybe one of the most important things, that everybody understands that, both in the leader position and as an aspiring Budoka.
Yeah, that reminds me of the saying how you want to make one decision that makes all other decisions irrelevant. So in this case, if I've decided to go on to class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, then if someone says, "Oh, do you want to go to a movie?" Nope, I can't do. I have practice. Oh, I'm feeling sick today. No, it's Tuesday. I already said I was going to go to practice. I'm going to practice. Yes. I've kind of done that with myself in terms of just some simple stuff like coffee. I said, I'm just going to drink black coffee, no more milk in my coffee. I'll drink milk elsewhere. I'll have yogurt and blah, 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 but I'm going to stay away from dairy in my coffee. Yes. And yeah, I love that. Just setting that tone and setting that expectation at the outset. So at this point in the interview, I just have I call them rapid fire questions, but they're just shorter questions that are more just to get to know you and some idiosyncrasies if there are any. So hopefully it'll be fun and interesting. But the first one is, do you have a quote or a proverb or a motto or something like these kind of sayings that you like or you think about often?
What we hear and see a lot nowadays in Kendo is, and what I really like is Ichigo Ichie. It means like you have one meeting is one chance. And I think you shouldn't pass up too easily on a chance to practice with somebody, you know? And it sounds very easy. It sounds very, okay, you know, but it has, for me, the feeling is very deep that, hey, I have to practice with you. This is the only chance. Maybe there's not going to be any chance to practice with you. And I think a lot of people, I know I can't come today. I'll see you next time. You don't know if there's going to be a next time. And especially with COVID, we resumed practice in Aruba, presencial. No, we practice normally. We use protectors, you know, for everything. But we shouldn't take it for granted that we can practice. And maybe the virus or the pandemic is going to take, you know, it's taking different kinds of turns. And so every time we can practice, we must capitalize on that. And I would like people to be as serious as they can in that. Ichigo, you know, practice every day, because you don't know when the next chance is that we can meet again. But that's one of them. That's the first one that comes to mind. Maybe you ask me 10 minutes later, I'm going to give another quote, but this is something that comes to mind right now.
That's wonderful. It's interesting because this is a common one for Kyudo people, Kyudo practitioners, because it is about when you're shooting the arrow, it's here and then it's gone. So yeah, it's a very popular one amongst Kyudo people. Next question is, in the last few years, what have you changed your mind on? Something that you used to think was important that's not as important now, or vice versa, something that you thought was true in some sense, but now you knew was false. Just what have you changed your mind over in the last couple of years?
Both as a Kendo teacher and as a teacher in school, I think for years I tried to instill my thoughts, my convictions too much on my students. And I recently, much too late, I think, but still, I moved away from that in the sense that now I don't want you to think what I think. I don't want you to share the beliefs that I have, because you are you and I am me. But I want you to think. So I want to confront people with things so they can form their educated opinion on that. I want them to think about things that maybe they didn't think deep enough about. So instead of telling you what to think, I want to tell you what to think about. Maybe that's one thing that I think I have changed consciously about.
Knowing some senseis that have gone through that change, or some that have still yet to go through that change, I know how difficult it is. But how it really seems to be like it's something that it's kind of freeing to you. It just makes you like, wow, like I'm now able to really, it's almost like a opening up of possibilities or a new life in some ways. So yeah, that's a wonderful thing.
And I notice it really feels, wow, you know, I let go of a burden. Because you take the burden of other people, you know, you feel responsible for other people. And why don't they see that? Why don't they think, you know, it's their life and they will or they won't realize it, and they will in their own way and in their own moment. So let me live my life and concentrate more on myself than on others. It doesn't make me happier. So yeah, it's freeing.
If there is one person in history, or just right now is alive or dead, and you can have a day-long conversation with them regardless of any language barrier, who might that be and why?
Oh, never thought about that. Never, a good question. Never thought about a conversation with. Uh, yeah, you think we all want to. We all at times, especially when you get a certain age, you start losing people. Uh, of course, I would like to have, my mom passed away 20 years ago. Of course, I want to have a conversation with her. Somebody, what would she think about that? Yeah, in that sense, if it's in a more general public sense, I don't know who I would want to have a conversation with. I have to think about that. I'm sorry, I owe you. I owe you an answer to that.
No, I love that answer. Most people talk about, Miyamoto Musashi or some other sensei that only recently passed away, but no, like our family, right?
Of course.
So, like, I love that answer. So a couple of lighter ones before we wrap up. What do you consider your comfort food?
Comfort food. Comfort food. But I indulge in pastry. Yeah, I eat too much of it. Yeah.
Is it a local variant or?
Any kind of pastry. When I go someplace, I shouldn't eat that much of that kind of stuff, and then I think, I need something sweet. And some people like chocolate, or other people they want to have some. But I like pastry. I indulge in pastry. So that would be my comfort food. Yeah, with a cup of coffee and my pastry, and I'm all good.
Island life, right?
It's mostly like Dutch pastry. I think that's my Dutch pastry kind of stuff.
Nice. And then last one before we wrap up is, if someone were to open up your YouTube account, so YouTube recommends videos based on stuff you watch most often, what would people see as YouTube recommending to you?
I talk a lot about this kind of thing with my wife, actually, how we're being manipulated because they know all our algorithms and stuff like that. It's scary stuff. What keeps popping up, of course, in the right hand pane, where they come with that's the suggestions that they pop to you, right? What are you talking about? Well, I have like two big. I have like, including Kendo. I think I have like three items that I'm really interested in. First of all, is Kendo, of course. The other one is music. Yeah, and that would suggestions of like 1970s heavy rock or glam rock, what they call, or glitter rock they called at the time. That was my and the third one would be anything about like TED Talks about language and linguistics and language policies. So something very different.
Nice.
Maybe that would. I think that's also kind of triangle that rules my life, or that's it's like Budo, language, and music.
Yeah. No, I that's why I like this question, because often you get behind, like, besides the Budo, there's a lot of us that is just focused on the practice. We want to make sure we're good, but we're humans and we have things that reinforce each other too. So I'm sure like what you've learned through linguistics and what you've learned through music, and you said you were in a band before, all kind of form into whoever you are as a person. All right. Thank you so much, Sergio. Won't you have a great night?
Great. Likewise. See you again.
See you. Bye. Yep.